Well, the Leafs did it again. Another year, another heartbreak. But this time, it might just be the end of an era. The series against the Florida Panthers wrapped up in 7 games, with the Panthers winning it in dramatic, not so much, fashion. And it was really about the GTHL. The GTHL roots were clashing on probably the biggest stage in hockey. It was hometown stars Mitch Marner and John Tavares facing off against Evan Rodriguez and the pest Sam Bennett. I'm your host, Sammy Brzezowski, joined alongside analysts Simon Hendricks and Jared Rotenberg. Panthers 1-7. It is yet another time the Leafs do not get out of round 2. Haven't done it for all of our lifetimes. I'm just going to ask right now, Simon, what are your initial thoughts on this series?
Just sadness, I think. Like, I was texting my friend mid-game 7. I think it was right after the Leafs scored to make it 3-1, and then when the Panthers scored right back to make it 4-1. We were saying, if this was a tight, close-fought game 7 that was maybe a 2-1 loss in overtime, we'd feel a bit better about it, maybe a bit less angry. But, man, I just felt so sad. Not necessarily for anybody in particular, but just, man, the Toronto Maple Leafs fan base, they have it so tough.
I mean, yeah, I was pretty depressed. I was out for dinner with my girlfriend, and I was going to race back home for the second period to watch it with my family. And I just was like, what's the point? I'm going to go watch them be terrible, or I'm going to keep eating food and drinking alcohol to soothe the pain. But Jared, I know you usually have a lot to say, and I imagine you have a lot to say on this one.
I'm just so frustrated because I truthfully, honestly believe the Leafs were the better team. They had every opportunity to win this series. They had every opportunity to put the reigning Stanley Cup champions in a stranglehold. They went up 2-0 in the series, won both games on home ice, then had the opportunity to take a commanding 3-0 series lead, put a chokehold on the champions, and slowly but surely they let up. They let the champs get life. They let them back into the series. I honestly believe the Leafs were the better team in 4 of 7 games of this series. And when it was just a regular hockey game where it was just 2 good teams going up against each other, going head-to-head, the Leafs had the edge in 3 of those 4 games. It was Game 4, Game 5, and frankly, Game 7 that the Leafs borderline didn't even show up. They showed up like a shell of their former selves. They showed up like a shell of what they're truly capable of and what they've proven they're capable of. They were in their own heads. They were overthinking passes. They were overthinking everything. And when you play visibly nervous, a team like the Florida Panthers smells blood in the water. And frankly, that's what happened. And as you put it at the beginning, this is the end of an era.
Yeah, certainly there's a lot of question marks for the Leafs going forward, contracts expiring. Before we get into all that, you talked about how this could have been the team. They were probably the better team on paper, and they are, by every meaning of it, the better team, but they weren't able to get it done. But, hockey's a team game. We're going to talk about what went wrong fully, but let's backtrack a little bit. Let's get personal. If there was one player for you guys that deserves the most blame on the Toronto Maple Leafs, I want to know who it is, and I want to know why.
That's a tough question, and I think since Sunday night's game, a lot of the online discourse has been about blaming a person, where, again, we are getting personal here. I do think it was more of a team loss than putting a blame on an individual player. But with that being said, I really did not like the play of Morgan Rielly this entire series. Yes, Morgan Rielly he does not had a good season by any means. There was a lot of inconsistencies, especially in the regular season with his defensive play. But even in the first round against Ottawa, you could make the argument that he was one of, if not our best defender for that series. He had a couple of really clutch goals. He had a lot of ice time against their top line of Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle as well. But I think this series, yes, he did have 4 points in 7 games. I believe 2 goals, 2 assists. But I think his defensive play really let us down. There was a couple of times where you could clearly see that he was out of position, not covering that he was out of position, not covering the front of the net like he should, completely lost his assignments. Like I remember the goal, I believe it was in game 1 or 2. It was the opening of the second period when he just completely lost Brad Marchand. He roofs one past Joseph Wall, nothing to do about that. There were a couple goals like that I saw him out there for. And I think him being kind of the, I wouldn't say best, but like the poster boy of the Toronto Maple Leafs defense for the past 10 years, I think you expect more from your assistant captain.
100%. I mean, I'll add to Morgan Riley before I give my answer. Morgan Riley's a guy that straight up did not have a great regular season. He just factually didn't. And that's a guy making over $7 million AAV per year. It's a leader on this team. It's one of the longest tenured members of the Leafs. But when he was struggling in the regular season, I think the response that I had, and more importantly, the response that the entirety of Leafs Nation had, is just wait for the playoffs. Morgan Riley always brings it. And when Morgan Riley brings it, more often than not, the team's able to find ways to win or at least stay close in series and stay competitive. He had a really good first round of the playoffs, as you mentioned.
He did.
And as such, the Leafs were able to go up to a massive 3-0 series lead against the Ottawa Senators. Unfortunately, we dropped 2 games in a row after that, but we were able to finish the job. And I would say Morgan Riley is arguably, probably not my number one MVP of that series, but is one of the most important parts to why we had so much success about Ottawa. When he started to struggle defensively, as much as he isn't necessarily the best defensive defenseman on our team, he's our highest paid defenseman. He's one of our strongest defensemen on the team. He's, as I mentioned, a major leader on this team. When he isn't showing up to play as the biggest face of our defensive core, it just put the entire defensive structure on this team at risk. Yes, we had guys like like Chris Tanev. I got confused with his brother for a moment, even though I literally have a Tanev jersey on the way. Sorry about that. We have guys like Tanev, guys like OEL that stepped up defensively. But when a guy like Morgan Riley, who's making over $7 million, isn't coming to play, your team is going to have trouble defensively.
Yeah, and just very quickly, the last point about Morgan Riley I want to make, and Sammy, I don't know if you have any thoughts on him, but kind of to Jared's point, it's not just that he played poorly in the series. It's that he, for the past 10 years, has been the face of the Toronto Maple Leafs defense. He is our assistant captain. He gets, it's been known that he is one of the most likable people on the team. Everyone loves Mo. All the fans really love Morgan Riley. I don't think I know a single Toronto Maple Leafs fan who says, I don't like Morgan Riley.
Tessa Virtue really likes Morgan Riley.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just the fact that he was not playing the level that we expected him to, I think it took the entire defensive core down with him, which is why I think he is the most disappointing player of the series.
Yeah, and just to kind of backpack on what you guys have been saying, throughout the first series, I mean, I noticed that he was scoring, but I just expect a certain level from him. He's like you said, the longest tenured player on the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's been through all of these disappointments. And so you come to expect a certain level of playoff intensity. He has felt every single one of those heartbreaks. He has felt the embarrassment as a Leafs player and as, like you said, a face of the franchise. And in the second round, he was either A, invisible, or B, a liability. Mm-hmm. And far too many times on this team, he was a liability. And I've always said my favorite defensemen are the ones that you don't notice when they're out there.
Yep.
Because they are the ones that are just playing good defense. Of course,
like your Tanevs, blocking shots left, right, and center.
And putting your body on the line. Tanev was the most hit player in the NHL during the playoffs by a wide margin. And it's just because he was playing in dirty areas, but not getting spectacular, not being risky. Riley was the opposite. I feel like he turned the puck over so often, especially in moments that mattered. And I agree. I think part of the reason why it was so disappointing is because we as Leafs fans and the rest of Leafs Nation have come to expect a certain level from him, and it just wasn't even close.
Not in the slightest. Getting into my answer now, it's hard to pinpoint one player. It's a lot easier to look at 4 players on this Leafs team. The core 4. When it came to the trade deadline, I made a comment, I made a tweet, and I could even put this tweet up in a little corner of this video, and I'll send that to the editor here, because I do stand by a lot of what I said. Essentially, my gist and my analysis of the trade deadline was we made 2 really strong additions, getting Carlo and getting Scott Laughton. 2 really defensive-minded guys who are going to bring intensity and physicality to this team. But Brad Treliving made a choice not to go after additional offensive depth, not to go after additional offensive scoring. When there were guys that I had my eyes on heading into the deadline, guys like Beauvillier, guys like Jacob Vrana, there were guys that I believe the Leafs could have gone after to shore up our offensive depth, because as much as the narrative surrounding the Leafs has been they weren't good enough defensively in the past few years, I would argue a much larger issue in the playoffs has been that the offensive well has dried up and that the puck stopped going in the net. That has been our issue. I believe it's the last 5 Game 7s, if not more. We've only had 1 total goal. We have not been able to score in these crucial moments. So my comment that I made was, we made a gamble not going after additional offensive depth. We went after 2 defensive guys. That's only a struggle. That is only a risk if your $10+ million players can't score like $10+ million players in the playoffs. And what happened is our $10+ million players did not come to play in Game 4, 5, 6, and 7 of this series. Or Game 6, they played well. But in the back half of the series, when we had the chance to put the Florida Panthers on the brink of elimination, when we had the chance to put them in a stranglehold, the well dried up offensively. Austin Matthews specifically is your captain. Oh, captain, my captain, his jersey's hanging right behind me. He is a guy that we've come to expect offensive brilliance from. He didn't really have that all year long. It's very heavily assumed that there was some kind of injury that was plaguing him. But at some point, the true superstars of this league, especially the ones who quite literally are the highest paid players in the league, which Austin Matthews was this season, they bring a different level of intensity into the playoffs. Nathan MacKinnon got bounced in the first round to the Dallas Stars. But if you look at the stats that he had in that 7-game series, if the Colorado Avalanche were going to eliminate the Dallas Stars, it was because of Nathan MacKinnon. He was playing otherworldly. And you didn't see that from Austin Matthews in this series, in these playoffs, and frankly, all season long. That's a guy I'm disappointed in.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jared. And again, I think the really sad thing is that this is not the first time you've had the Austin Matthews playoff struggle conversation, right? And like you said, you watch the Rantanen game, right, where he scores a hat trick in the 3rd period. I don't think Matthews has had a moment like that. And now, that was an unbelievable moment. Probably won't happen for a long time again. But you know what I mean? Like, we've had these conversations of, you see Connor McDavid scoring or assisting Leon Draisaitl in an overtime winning goal in a crucial game. You see Mikko Rantanen scoring a hat trick in the 3rd period. You see how easily Nathan MacKinnon can take over games. Hell, like, even when he was playing in the playoffs, Sidney Crosby, he could just take over games both offensively and defensively. Where with Austin Matthews, every game you go into as a Leafs fan, you're like, what's Austin going to do this game? Is he going to score? And he only had 1 goal in this entire series. Even going back to 2023 when Florida eliminated us, that's what's in 12 playoff games against Florida, he has 1 goal. Now, granted, that goal was a pretty huge goal.
Majorly important.
Huge goal, but
it is a classic Austin Matthews style goal, and we know he's capable of those. And that's why it's so frustrating that we don't see those more often in the playoffs.
Yeah, totally. And, I think at the same time, I really like the way Matthew Nyes played, especially in the first round. I know he has caught some slack, but I actually think Mitch Marner had a okay series, at least offensively, I think. I think he was able to make some pretty good breakout pass. I mean, there was that one awful spinorama interception that led to a goal. But I think if you are to pinpoint one offensive player who has had these big expectations between the core 4, I really do think you have to look at Austin Matthews and say, you are our captain, you are our best player, you are our first overall pick almost 10 years ago now. We need you to make something happen, and it didn't happen.
And the thing is with Matthews is, as much as the offensive well dried up, the reason I don't just call out Matthews and I call out the entirety of the core 4 is Matthews played a sensational defensive series. He truthfully did. He made the Barkov line borderline a non-factor. He truthfully eliminated that offensive threat. He shut them down defensively. He did play very well in other areas of the ice, but he's not paid $13 and a bit million per season to be a defensive guy. As much as we knew going into his draft year, his player comparables were guys like Kopitar. We knew he always had this Selke level play in him. But the thing that made Austin Matthews so special is not only is he bringing Selke level play each and every night, but he also has one of the most wicked wrist shots that you've ever seen in your life. He's one of the most dangerous goal scorers in the league, and he didn't show that nearly enough in these playoffs. Then you look at a guy like John Tavares, and as much as he got stripped of the C this season, for all intents and purposes, he is one of the biggest leaders on this team. There's a reason he was wearing the C for the past few seasons. Aside from a really good game 1 where he scored 2 goals, where was John Tavares as this series went farther on? Mitch Marner, as you said, he didn't have a bad series necessarily, but he also didn't elevate his game as much as a guy who's currently making $11 million and is likely asking for in and around the $13 million range. He didn't elevate his game to that level. And William Nylander, I am one of the biggest William Nylander fans there is. I've been very impressed with him in the playoffs. He's always a player that brought confidence into these games when everyone else is playing visibly nervous. This is the one series that jumps out at me where I didn't see William Nylander take over these big games. I didn't see William Nylander being a factor or even looking confident and like the skillful player he is in the back half of this series.
Yeah, I mean, he's usually the guy that all Leafs fans kind of rely on to actually show up, and you can't really say he did. I love both of your points about how there were certain players like Mitch Marner. Sure, he was okay. You're not paying 11 mil for okay. Yep. You're paying 11 mil for success. So when it comes to me, the worst player in the series isn't the player itself. It's the power play. The power play has time and time again been the Maple Leafs' biggest failure in the playoffs. I have the stats up here. 21.6%. Now, that's not terrible, but it's just not good enough when you have a power play that has 5 forwards on it, 5 of whom make millions and millions of dollars, right? We have probably on paper the best power play possible, and we just haven't been able to figure it out. We were 9th in the NHL. The only team that was behind us is the Panthers. They moved on. Every other team in the conference finals are in the top 6, pardon me. And I think it just goes to show that when we score on the power play, good things happen. When we don't, this happens. And I think in the games that we won, especially in the Ottawa series, it was because the power play was working. And it's because guys like Marner, Tavares, Matthews were stepping up and creating offense. And they just didn't do that enough in the Florida series.
And part of why I was so confident at the beginning of the Ottawa series, if you remember, is the power play was flying on all cylinders heading into the playoffs in the first few games of the playoffs. And then, as seems to be a trend with the Toronto Maple Leafs, eventually the well starts to dry up. And that became very apparent, especially as we got into this Florida Panthers series, where you look at the power play to be one of the main areas of strength. I go back to my point at the beginning where I would argue the Leafs might just be the better team when compared to the reigning Stanley Cup champions. But if you aren't stepping up in these big moments, if you aren't capitalizing on your chances, well, a team that is championship pedigree, like the Florida Panthers, they aren't going to sit back and just watch you waste those opportunities. They're going to use that to give themselves momentum that you're not scoring on your opportunities, and they're then going to bury one in the back of your net. And that's what a team like the Panthers is capable of doing, and frankly, that's what they did.
Yeah, just one really quick point. I think what we also have to, we say that the power play is not good. I think we have to look at why it's not good, right? Mm-hmm. And, you hear the Leafs and even the Panthers were saying, all the noise and all the pressure the fans bring to the Toronto Maple Leafs and these players, it's really affecting them. And while I don't necessarily agree because, like, the Philadelphia Eagles went to the Super Bowl, they won it last year. Did they win it last year? Yeah, they did win it last year. They won the Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure they had the most pressure of anybody. So when people say, the noise is really affecting them, I don't really buy into that. I get it is really tough to play in the NHL and making millions of dollars in Toronto. But to get back to what we were talking about with the power play, you have all this pressure coming in on you. You're playing nervous. And then you have a team like Florida who just attacks you on the power play. And they play so aggressive. And that's what we were talking about. They can't make a good pass. They can't get in any clear shooting lanes. They can't really get to the front of the net because Florida's just, they're animals in the front of the net. And so I think kind of all of that coming together just made for kind of just a sloppy mess.
Yeah, and before we get into some positives from the Leafs, I think, like you said, it was a sloppy mess. And for me, it was about the zone entry in the power play, and that has been an issue. We keep doing that dumb drop pass, give it to Marner, have him try to skate through 5 people while everyone's standing at the blue line. Clearly, it's not working because I think once we get set up, we are a dangerous power play unit, but getting set up was such an issue. We lose the first faceoff, boom, that was 45 seconds, gone. First unit tired, let's throw it Domi. Let's see what he can do. Yeah. It's not going to work against the defending Stanley Cup champions. But let's talk about what did work. We'll start with you, Jared, this time. The Leafs had a lot of negatives, but, there were some guys that looked good. So who would be the best player in the series, and who do you think was playing up to the expectations?
Well, as we mentioned, with the core four not stepping up, there were other players we were looking at for offense. You mentioned the ability of Matthew Nyes. He's easily solidified himself as part of that now core 5 is what it's being called. He's the best left winger that this Leafs team has had in many, many years. We've been crying and dying for a winger as capable of this. He's an offensive power forward. He's had significant breakaway chances. He's been, really working on his hands clearly because he's been developing his dangles, his shots, his deceptiveness. He's a player that you always know is going to bring it 100%, 110% of the time. The only game, probably the first game I've ever seen against the Florida Panthers that Matthew Nyes didn't bring it is, what do you know? Once again, the Florida Panthers injured him at some point in this series. But that is a guy I look at who very much was able to add that scoring when the core four wasn't really contributing. And then who had this play from Max Pacioretty on their bingo card? So good offensively, consistently with scoring clutch goals. He's played, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the stat is he's played more playoff games than any other member of this Toronto Maple Leafs team. And he also has some of the most offensive points and some of the most contribution in his career in terms of the playoffs. He always brings it in these big moments, even when the spotlight is bright, which is kind of my pushback to the whole narrative about, the spotlight was too bright, the pressure was on him. Max Pacioretty was playing in Montreal for years. I don't know if you've seen the Bell Center. It's absolutely buzzing every single time that Montreal Canadiens team takes the ice. And that doesn't seem to affect that team. I know they obviously made a Stanley Cup final run during the COVID year, but regardless, with all the noise, with all the Montreal media, with all the pressure, that team seems to find a way. I don't exactly remember the last time a team has gone on a Stanley Cup run with zero media pressure. As the further you go, the more the pressure ramps up, the more the fans are attending, the more the fans are tuning in. That's something that typically molds teams and inspires teams and encourages them. It's more a reflection on the Leafs that outside noise and pressure crumbles them.
Yeah, Jared, that is an excellent point about kind of not rising up to the noise, not trying to be inspired, and instead of backing away. Max Pacioretty obviously was probably the biggest surprise of this entire playoffs, let alone this series for the Maple Leafs.
Scratched game 1 and 2 against Ottawa.
Yeah, that's right.
And the moment he came in.
Yeah. I remember people were like, really? Pacioretty going in this game? Yeah.
I was one of them before Game 6. I was watching it with my brother, and I went, why is Pacioretty in the lineup instead of Robertson? Scores the game-winning goal. So it shows what we know.
Yeah, exactly. I do think that Max Domi also played pretty well this series. The only thing about Max Domi is he had 29 penalty minutes in 7 games this series, which, we were talking about the Leafs power play being not great. The penalty kill was pretty solid as well, but 29 minutes of power, like in the penalty box in 7 games, like that's not great. That's more than the 4 a game, basically, right? But I think the player that does deserve a lot of credit for his play and his spirit this series is Chris Tanev. We talked about him a little bit, but again, if you want to chirp on the Maple Leafs defense, I would totally understand that. But Chris Tanev, I believe he led the league, maybe not the league, but he led the team in blocked shots. He led the league by a wide margin, like Sammy said, in hits taken. And, he just never had any back down. He never had any quit. He was, again, I think he's the oldest defender on this team. And there were times when he was definitely the best defender on this team throughout the series.
Defensively, without
question.
Yes,
100%, yeah. And again, I think we were talking about breakouts and zone entries in the power play. And I think the criticism that you could have given this Leafs defense, not only defensive ability, but is the zone breakouts from our own end without turning the puck over either at our own blue line or in the neutral zone. So I do think that the defense was not great in that respect, but players like Chris Tanev and Brandon Carlo, they really held their own in our end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back a little bit to Jared's point about the media, it isn't only your team's fans that are watching this game. You're the Leafs. You're the most watched team in hockey, and you're going to have other people watching. And like you said, when you said the noise hasn't really not hit the good teams, I was thinking of the St. Louis Blues in 2019. But then looking back, even a team like that had half the league looking at them, and probably really 31 teams or whatever it was at the time, cheering for the Blues instead of Boston because it was Boston. Nobody likes Boston.
Exactly.
Present company included. And I just think that if you can't rise to the noise, don't be a professional hockey player. Yep. You're getting paid $13 million to be a hockey player that can win games. It's your job. We're not getting paid here to choke on the podcast, even though we kind of do. But it's your job to thrive under that pressure. It's what the big-time players look forward to. Like guys who used to play, like Justin Williams, for example. Game 7 would come,
Game 7.
and he'd just go off because under the brightest lights, that's when you should have a fire lit under your rear, and we just didn't see it from this team.
Yeah, and sorry to cut you off there, Jared, but I just want to make a really quick point. You can almost, not only with hockey, but we all clearly remember the 2019 Toronto Raptors run. When they beat Philadelphia in Game 7, I don't think anybody in the country of Canada put more pressure on the Raptors to win after that Game 7 against Philadelphia. We were like, okay, this team is for real. We made it past the second round. Like, we had a big second round curse with LeBronto and everything.
Took down Embiid too. Took down a heavily favored 76ers team.
Yeah, and so at that point, it was everybody's eyes are on them. We have the superstar in Kawhi Leonard. We have an incredible bench. We have Marcus Gasol. We had the team. We had the pieces. And then we fell down 2-0 against Milwaukee in the semifinal series. And everybody was like, oh, well, we're screwed.
The noise started.
The noise was chirping. And then what did we do? That team won 4 straight in Milwaukee and then took 3 out of 3 games in Golden State in Game 6, winning the championship. So people talk about the Toronto noise, and I get it. Basketball and hockey, clearly hockey is a bigger sport in Toronto than basketball is. But man, like, you talk to anybody. I remember in high school, like, people who didn't even like sports, like, you could talk to anybody and they're like, yeah, man, this Raptors team, like, look at them. So I think, people blaming the noise in Toronto for why this team is crumbling, I understand why you would say that. And I think to a degree that does play an effect, but I think that comes down to the players on this team not rising to the noise.
Simon, I couldn't have put it better than the way you just worded it. There's always pressure when it comes to the playoffs. The true competitors, the true players with the heart of a champion, they rise to that and they don't crumble under that pressure. And unfortunately, this Leafs core has had a consistent habit of crumbling under that pressure. And that isn't the fault of the fans. That isn't the fault of the media. That's the fault of them. They have not prepared themselves for these moments, even though what I was saying leading into Game 7 is they've had their tests, they've had their pop quizzes, they've had their quizzes. It's damn exam time when you get to Game 7. And somehow they just keep flunking this exam year after year after year. At some point, it's not on the test maker, it's on the test taker. They are not coming to these games prepared enough for these moments. And that's on them, that they're letting the nerves so visibly get to them to the point that, believe me, if me and these guys here, I was a house league hockey player personally, if I could sniff out how visibly nervous the team looks, a team like the Florida Panthers smells blood in the water and takes you down. They rip you to shreds with their Panther claws, beating you 6-1 twice in the final 3 games of the series. That's not on the noise. That's not on the fans. That's on you for not being ready for these moments.
Yeah, and we were talking about who was ready. We talked about Matty Nyes, obviously dealing with something because you saw the Ottawa series, he was killer, maybe our best player. Started the Florida series, same thing, and then he was -6 in the last 3 games, or -5 in the last 3 games. I think if we're talking about positives, we mentioned Morgan Riley being a negative, but the D core in general was a positive for me. They rose to the occasion. Of the top 10 leaders in block shots, 5 of them are Toronto Maple Leafs in this
I didn't
playoffs.
even know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
Simon
crazy.
Benoit 1, Chris Tanev 2, Brandon Carlo 4, Jake McCabe 5, and Morgan Riley 9.
Wow.
That's playoff hockey, getting your
That
body
is.
on the line. Benoit, unbelievable. Tanev, unbelievable. 1 and 2, I mean, that is the type of defenseman that you need in order to succeed in the playoffs. And frankly, there were times that they did their job. You can't really say they were amazing when we lose 6-1 in 2 games that are probably the most pivotal games in recent history. But they did their job, and you got to put most of the blame on the forwards here. And we've been talking about it all off cam throughout the morning. The forward core and the forward lineup is likely what's going to change. Let's talk about the future of the Leafs. What do we see happening in the offseason, and what do we want to see happen in the offseason?
I've been a big fan of this Leafs team, this Leafs core, these Leafs stars, these Leafs players for years. And when it used to be a debate, specifically after the Montreal series, after that 3-1 choke, the big debate was, are you team run it back or are you team blow it up? And I've been a big proponent on team run it back. I believed this core was good enough. I believe with more kicks to the can, they were capable of getting the job done. Never has it become more clear throughout this 7-game series against the Florida Panthers that there is something fundamentally rotten with the core of this Leafs team. All of the intangible pieces have changed. It was not the same team as years past. This team was different in terms of the intangibles, in terms of the defensive core, which, side note on the defensive core, we talked about how good it was. Good thing that all those defensemen are all under contract for the next year. Mm-hmm. That is something that's very much going to continue next year. But we're talking about what's going to change. It's that one thing that has remained the same throughout every single time the Leafs have done this. There's something fundamentally wrong with these players and how they crumble under pressure. Austin Matthews, you're not moving that guy. He was just named captain. He's staying. William Nylander just signed a contract extension a few years ago. You have a choice of John Tavares and Mitch Marner. John Tavares, it depends on what that dollar amount is. John Tavares, if he's asking for, I'd say, a hair over $6 million, I tell him to kick rocks and go back to New York. But Mitch Marner, I truthfully love the guy. He has been a homegrown kid, a Toronto-born kid. He wanted to win here so damn badly that it honestly feels like that desire to win in Toronto ended up being his fatal flaw. He so clearly wanted it more than anyone, and it made him change his playing style under pressure in the playoffs. I honestly believe the best thing for his career is to go and find success somewhere else. Because don't get it twisted, he will find success somewhere else when he goes somewhere else. The best thing for his career is to go somewhere else. If he wants to come back in Toronto, I don't know why he would do that for his career. That's a choice he's making. He did just have a kid here. He did just get married here. If he wants to come back, I would at least hear him out on dollar amount. It better not be a hair over what Mikko Rantanen just received. If he wants to come back, I would hear out the argument, but I do believe now is the best time for both the team and the player to just get a fresh start. Getting rid of the 10.893 that Mitch Marner made allows the Leafs to have more money to go into free agency and change up that core. And for Marner, he should go and be a star somewhere else. I don't think he's going to be capable of overcoming these demons in this city, and I would love if he proved me wrong next year. But as of now, I was a believer for so long, it's becoming very hard to still believe after year, the same player looks visibly nervous in these Game 7s.
Yeah, the belief is certainly fading, but I want to talk on the John Tavares point in just a moment, but while we're on the topic of Mitch Marner, you are the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Mitch Marner, he has a high amount. What is the absolute highest number you'll go on Mitch Marner? Because I'm curious to hear this, because throughout Leafs Twitter, I've heard numbers all the way up to Matthews, which, wrong, and all the way down to, like, what Nylander signed for in, like, 2018 or whatever it was.
So that's obviously
okay.
ridiculous.
I was going to say that's not. That's not going to happen.
There has to be a middle level that you guys would be okay with signing Marner for. I want to know what the absolute highest number to sign Marner to keep him part of this core.
Well, I think Jared brought up the point that he probably shouldn't be making more than Mikko Rantanen. Like, Mikko Rantanen, unbelievable player. I would argue Mikko Rantanen is a better player than Mitch Marner.
Yep.
I think that
offensively, at least.
Offensively,
obviously, Marner does more on the defensive end of the ice. He's a penalty killer.
Yes.
But Marner definitely doesn't rise his play under pressure to the level that Mikko Rantanen
exactly.
just
And
he can.
Rantanen is in the Final Four, and he already won a cup with Colorado, right? But again, you have to take into account that Texas doesn't have isn't as heavy as the state tax. Don't have state tax, so he was making, I believe, signed 8 by 12, or 12 by 8, whatever. Whatever
I
it is. Yeah, 12 million a year for 8 years. Now, if the Leafs were to re-sign, obviously that number would have to be a little bit higher because of the tax, and it's more expensive to live in Canada with everything going on. So I would say the absolute max I would give Marner would probably be 12.5.
You took the number right out of my mouth. Heading into the playoffs, I said 12.5 is the absolute most that I'm giving Mitch Marner. I would be lying if I said it doesn't feel like his value should be lower. It should be lessened based on what we saw from him in the playoffs. In an ideal world, it does leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth to see him sign a contract more than Mikko Rantanen. I think being realistic, I wouldn't be happy about 12.5, but I would give him 12.5. If you're talking about what I want him to sign at, it's probably no more than $12 million a year. It's probably a pretty similar number to what William Nylander just got.
Yeah, and again, like I say that 12.5 should be the highest. I don't think the Leafs should do that. Like I think that they, kind of like we were saying, after all these cases of him not performing in key moments, and again, I feel for the guy. He's a human being too. After all of the noise that he's had around him for the past like 8-10 years, however long it's been.
Since 2015.
Since 2015.
We're coming on 10 years since he was drafted.
Exactly. Since like all the pressure and all of the criticism that he's got, I know he's a Toronto boy. He loves this team. He wants to win with this team. But kind of to Jared's point, I think it would be in the Maple Leafs' best interest and in Mitch Marner's and his family's best interest. Again, I don't want to speak for the guy, but as an observer, and like going over his career and just the amount of, again, noise that has been going on around him with this fan base, I think it would be best for both parties to go their separate ways. But there's definitely going to be a team out there who pays Mitch Marner like $12.5, $13 million a year, like Utah.
Yeah.
Like that would be like, so they have the cap space to Chicago.
Detroit.
Yeah. I was just going to bring up Detroit. Like Stevie Y, he has not been a good GM in Detroit since coming over from Tampa Bay.
R.I.P. the Yzer plan.
Yeah, like I don't think that's much of a hot take. If he's looking to be like, no, man, like I am one of the league's best general managers, I'm going to go out and get Mitch Marner. Like I could totally see that happening. Plus Detroit's pretty close to Toronto, right? So, well, kind of close.
He could go home, see the family on the weekend.
Exactly.
But I have to kind of disagree with you guys a bit. 12.5 for me is just, it's ridiculous. I don't think he's earned that. I don't think he's earned, personally, a cent over William Nylander. He hasn't shown me in the playoffs where it actually matters that he deserves the contract that he's likely going to beckon for. I would sign him at $12 million. He's a homegrown guy. He has brought a lot of love to the team. I've always been hard on Marner, but just because I know at his highest level, he's one of the best players in the NHL, and I know he can get to that level. That's been my kind of viewpoint with the whole team in general. But at the end of the day, they talk about hometown discount. You want these fans to be on your side. You want this team to rally around you. You want the fans to not talk about your contract every time you make a mistake. Sign the contract you've already signed. Sign the exact same contract. It would be financially not the smartest move, you know? He could definitely go and get a couple more mil, but at that point, you have to understand what's more important to you. Do you want to win a Stanley Cup for the team that you grew up cheering for, where you've lived your whole life? Or do you want to go to San Jose and be in the bottom of the standings just to make an extra $3 million a year when you're already a millionaire? It's, for me, obviously, I'm not an NHL hockey player. Yeah, I would have been if it wasn't for my knee. But I grew up a Leafs fan. I'm a Leafs fan till the day I die, no matter how much they embarrass me. If I had to choose between $1 million when I'm already a millionaire or a couple $100,000 when I'm already a millionaire, it's no question I'm giving myself that low contract, and I am hoping that they put it towards further playoff success, because that's the goal. You take a $10.9 million contract, which very unlikely to happen. The Leafs go sign another depth forward, and we have playoff success. No matter how you play, you're still going to get celebrated for being like, gee, thanks, Marner.
A statue will be built for you if you score a goal to even clinch the Stanley Cup Finals, let alone win the thing.
Yeah.
Go on a run. A lot of the guys on Legends Row are not Stanley Cup champions. They're just guys that are forever beloved and iconic members of this organization. People will love you if you prove that there's something to love, if you prove that you could step up under pressure. It's cheesy to say win or lose as long as you try. I know that's, your classic grade 4 advice. But seriously, if he just brought it in the playoffs and didn't play visibly nervous, stepped up, rose to the occasion, had a dominant series like a Nathan MacKinnon, but ultimately ended up getting bowed out by a better team, that's one thing. But the fact that he's constantly... And I don't even think it's a noise thing. I think it's he puts more noise on himself than anybody in the fan base could put on him. He puts more noise on himself. The fact that he is a Toronto-born kid, the fact that he has family here and friends here and grew up here. He knows what it means to be a member of Leafs Nation. He wears that on his heart and on his sleeve every single time he hits the ice. And at some point, it's clear that Pressure isn't making diamonds in this situation. It's just crumbling a player that we know when he's playing with swagger and confidence, he could be a top player in the league. And he hasn't shown it to us. And for that reason, it probably does make sense for him to move on. Sammy, to respond to your take regarding the contract, I'll tell you, speaking realistically, he's not getting that amount. I don't like the idea. It does leave a bad taste in my mouth. If I was GM, it would leave a bad taste in my mouth to give him a $12.5 million deal, to give him more than Mikko Rantanen. I wouldn't be happy about it, but I would suck it up and do it because I do believe the Leafs are a better team with Mitch Marner than without him.
The only thing I would say to that point is that we haven't seen it. Like, I don't think you can say that with certainty that we are better without him than we are with him. I think that's a educated, like that's a good prediction, and you would have a lot of facts and like just a lot of it's like gut feeling that would tell you that.
Yeah.
But coming back to changes, I don't think there is a world where Brandon Shanahan is back next year. His contract is up.
Bye, pal.
His contract is up this summer. I don't think there is a chance in hell that Brandon Shanahan is the president of hockey operations for the Toronto Maple Leafs next year. That's not to say he'll be out of the league without a job. He's built an incredible system this past 10 years, built what we all thought was going to be a heavy contender for the past however many years. And he did that through the draft and free agency and good trades. Well, good trades for the most part. But I just think when you look at change, and the kind of old adage is change starts from the top down.
Yep.
Certainly. And I think we were talking about the Eisler plan or whatever it was, the Shanna plan. On paper, it should have worked.
Yep.
You can't really fault him for that, but at the same time, when a team is losing, if you can't just dismantle the team, you got to change what is not working. We changed the GM. We changed the coach. You got to go up. You got to change what's happening at the highest level, because maybe some of these trades went under the wire. We talked last year, I remember, about how there was a potential Marner trade years ago, and Shanahan, I was almost going to say Shanaplan, he vetoed it. Mm-hmm. We don't know what the team looks like without Mitch Marner. Team could have looked drastically different. And while I don't think he's the number one person to blame, at the end of the day, he's a constant. The core four
that's
and
right.
Shanahan, that is a constant. And I think both of them need to change. And before we get into our final thoughts,
Could I say one thing on Shanahan?
Go ahead.
Essentially, just my point is, and it's almost like putting the way you guys broke it all down into a nice, pretty bow. Brendan Shanahan has no more bullets in the chamber. Mm-hmm. He fired Lou Lamoriello and Kyle Dubas. That's two GMs that worked under Shanahan. He's fired those bullets. Regarding coaches, he fired Mike Babcock, he fired Sheldon Keefe, and now he has a third coach in his tenure. At some point, the bullets are on him. He's gotten rid of all the other pieces that he could try to explain as, this is the reason we didn't win. This coach is the reason we didn't win. This GM is the reason we didn't win. At some point, when you get rid of all the bullets in your chamber, you're the final one standing. You're the reason that this team was assembled in the manner it was assembled. You're the one that it was heavily reported that he was having way too much control in terms of trades that were made and not made. At some point, the blame falls on him. As you said, I don't doubt that he will find a job in the NHL one day. He is obviously a legendary NHL player on those Detroit Red Wings teams, was a superstar, won a Stanley Cup. His time in Toronto has come to an end, whether it's happy news or sad news. It just is the matter of fact. The Shanna plan is over. His time in Toronto has come to an end, and it's the end of an era.
It certainly is the end of an era for the Leafs. I mean, something is going to change. Something is going to happen. This era kind of marks a really it marks a very we're going to try. It marks an experimental phase for the Leafs.
10-year-long experimental phase.
Exactly. And we grew up in the Kessel era, an era where we were bottom of the league. Making the playoffs in 2013 was unprecedented. We were incredibly excited. It was something that we'd never felt before. And so now that this marks the end of an era, it has called to question the passion of a lot of Leafs fans. We've been talking about pressure and how much this city loves this team. I am a Leafs fan. You are a Leafs fan. You are a Leafs fan.
Till the day I die.
Till the day you die. And when you talk about pressure, it's because we love this team so much. And we lost again. All I want to know is, are you going to keep rooting for this team, and is this team always going to be your favorite?
No, I think I'm gonna go over to Seattle.
Fair.
Actually, yeah, no.
I was just going to say I'm taking my talents over to the Utah Mammoth.
yeah, that's
Nope.
right.
I will be here cheering for the blue and white. As I said, till the day I die. They are my team through thick and through thin. I think it's frankly pathetic when I hear stories of people, oh, I was a fan of the Leafs, but then 2013 happened, and now I'm a Bruins fan.
Oh, well, that's just
Go
insane.
screw yourself.
Shout out Charlie Smeechin, Montreal Canadiens fan and sport media soon-to-be graduate, did that, but for the Habs.
Oh man, that's brutal.
Go screw yourself, Charlie.
Yeah, no,
I have no respect for that. I just have no respect for that. I will be with this team forever.
Yeah, no, totally. Again, I think it's a curse, man. It really is being a Toronto Maple Leafs fan because, like Sammy said, we just love this team so much, and it just all the noise. I don't think comes from a bad place. All the noise and the pressure comes from a literally do anything and we will love you to the day that you die. Like, just please give us a reason to like actually want to love this team and cherish this team with all of our hearts. And right now, I think a lot of Leaf fans are kind of. I really hope this isn't the case, but the way I feel, especially watching that Game 7 when people were throwing the jerseys on the ice and someone threw a beer. Yeah, that was still on the ice, I think, for like the almost all the third period, which I thought was kind of funny. There was a big brown yellow stain on the ice for a while. That was just.
Sorry, that was me, actually.
Yeah, was that you?
Nice toss.
Yeah, that was a nice toss. But yeah, I think this might be a year where you see people saying, that's it, I'm done.
They'll be back.
They'll be back.
We'll all be back.
We will all be back.
Yeah, I usually take like a break. I wait till July 1st, then my ears prick up a little bit. I'm like, okay, what are we gonna do? Who's gonna go? And then September rolls around, preseason starts. It's time to cheer again. It's just how it works as a Leafs fan and as a passionate hockey fan. And that's why I think it's so stupid, the whole pressure argument. It's not pressure. You're beloved in this city. We care so much that when you underperform, it's not hatred, it's tough love. Guys like us that have been watching this team forever, we know Mitch Marner is a fantastic hockey player. We know Austin Matthews is the best goal scorer in the National Hockey League. So we expect it from you. High love, high expectations. I think burning jerseys and ripping them up, throwing on the ice, not only is that stupid, you don't owe the team anything, but you have an allegiance to this team. Stick through it. You can complain all you want, but that is your team. And also, jersey's like $200.
It's a bad financial decision.
And you're throwing away a brand new Matthews jersey. Like, what are we doing? Like, give it to a kid. I saw people burning it. Give it to a kid who can't afford it. Give it to a fan who can't afford it, because I have had the same Leafs jerseys from when I was like 8. I still hang up the Phil Kessel one every year at the playoffs. I still hang up a Jonathan Bernier jersey every now and then, rip it to shinny, because that shows the level of commitment
You've been here.
that we've had, right?
You've been here.
And so, like you guys said, we're going to be back. But just to wrap things up, from both of you, I want a 1-minute explanation of where this team is headed and how we can win it all.
Jared, I'm going to let you go first on that one.
The core is fundamentally rotten, and change is needed. One member or two members of this core four are going to be switched out. The president of hockey operations is going to be switched out, and this team, come October, is going to look very, very different. We are all going to be here cheering for it. It will be the same jersey, the same logo, the same name, but it will be a different Toronto Maple Leafs team. And what I always say, what I will keep saying every time I sit back crying on my couch watching these heartbroken defeats, is that one day, one fateful day, all of this will be worth it as I sit there and watch my team lift the Stanley Cup. And I firmly believe it can come, not with this core, but in this new era that we're about to begin.
Jared, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you just said. And if I were to just carry on that for a second, I'm just visioning the future. Marner, I hate to say it, I can't see it back in a Leafs jersey. It makes me so sad that this homegrown talent, his last game of a Maple Leaf, is going to end with people booing him off the ice. That is just so unfortunate. It really is heartbreaking. But I can't see him coming back. I can't see Brandon Shanahan coming back. Honestly, you can make a case that John Tavares shouldn't be back. So like Jared said,
depending on price,
Yeah.
I'm willing to get rid of him.
Yeah.
It just depends on price tag. I think if it's over $6 million, he could kick rocks.
Yeah, so like you said, this team is going to be very, very different. And with that in mind, I seriously believe that next year, this team is going to play like they have nothing to lose. I think that we had a lot to lose this year, and we did. And I think the players knew that. I think with the changes of Brett Treliving as GM and Coach Berube as our new head coach, I think that the players knew, and everyone knew, that it was on the players. We all knew that if they couldn't do it this year, it was not our coach's fault. It was not our GM's fault. It was on the players and this leadership. And we lost, and it was bad. And I'm still very sad about it. Very sad, as I'm sure we all are.
Yeah,
But
no,
good
this was
teams
tough.
use that pressure, and it inspires them to go all the way.
And so I think, just my very last quick point. If our core gets changed and we have more role players who are maybe can break out next year, and obviously we still have Matthews and Nylander leading the way,
More offensive depth, please.
I think that this team will be, you know what? We lost. The brakes are off. Let's just go out there like we're just going to kick everyone's ass and prove everybody wrong.
And you know what? It may or may not happen. I think, if I'm being honest, if I have the floor for a second, I really wanted to win a Stanley Cup with this core. I do complain about Mitch Marner all the time. I complain about Austin Matthews, Morgan Riley, William Nylander, John Tavares. If they were to come back, I would still cheer for them. I would still be happy that they're there. I wanted and still want this team to win a cup with those guys. Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Austin Matthews. It was an era of Toronto that made Leafs hockey exciting again. It wasn't just a November win against the Minnesota Wild that we eked out and we're like, let's go. We're 2-17 now. It was a team that I firmly believe, if bounces had gone their way, could have won a Stanley Cup. Do I want Marner back? Yes. Do I think it will happen? No. Same with Tavares. I want him back. I don't know if it'll happen or not. But what I do know is that Leafs fans will come back delusional as ever in September, ready to cheer for the blue and white.
I agree. I think that was a brilliant closing remark. And again, if you're a true Leafs fan and you're like, I don't know if I'll be back next year, you're lying to yourself.
You'll be back.
Well, everyone will be back.
This is the Leafs team that took us from boyhood into manhood. And now it's about time we learn about and find out about what that team that takes us into adulthood is going to be. We didn't get the job done from boys to men. Now let's see what happens as we leave university, get into our working lives, and hopefully we'll be watching this team get the job done as we move on into a next era of our lives.
That'll do it for the Six Hockey Podcast. Us as Leafs fans will be back next year, delusional as ever, cheering for the blue and white with our hands over our heads. And I'm sure we'll be back next year saying the exact same thing.